What do we do to change the policies? Because that's where we haven't seen quite as much change. The question of decision making, you know, you can look at it if we look at the current wars and near wars that the US is involved with. You have in Iraq, the president has campaigned on the basis, I will end the war, and built this extraordinary movement on that basis. Now, the war is still continuing. We don't hear a lot about it. There are still 130,000 US troops, about 150,000, last count, US mercenaries, fighting in Iraq. Are there the same levels of casualties that have been going on? No. Will they rise again? Maybe. But is the war going on? Absolutely. Iraq is still at war. However, the technical requirements of the US-Iraq agreement, the so-called SOFA agreement, are being adhered to so far. The question is, for how long will that be the case? Will the US abide by the requirements of the SOFA that it withdraw all of its identified combat troops, which is somewhere between 80 and 100,000, depending on who in the Pentagon you ask, leaving behind anywhere from 50,000 or more behind? Will they pull them all out by next summer? Not clear. Will they pull out, crucially, all US troops, bar none, from Iraq by December 31st, 2011? We don't know. We know that if we don't demand it, it's not going to happen. We know it's not going to happen because we elected a president who said he was going to end the war. But there is room to maneuver there. On Afghanistan, we saw the opposite. We saw a president who came to power based on a campaign that said, I will end the war in Iraq, and I will escalate the war in Afghanistan. Nobody can claim that President Obama is not doing what he said he would. He said he would escalate in Afghanistan, and he's doing it. We didn't challenge him sufficiently during the campaign. We did challenge. I think it's not fair to say nobody knew, nobody challenged, nobody talked about it. There was plenty of challenge, but there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough saying, you're saying that precisely because you're worried you won't have credentials, you won't have your military chops if you don't find a war you can call your own, when you say that you're running on the basis of an anti-war platform. We didn't say that enough, and we failed. And so what happens? President Obama gets sworn in, and within weeks, he deploys an additional 21,000 new troops and says, now we're going to talk about a strategy. How backward is that? You send the troops and then you decide why you're going to send troops? And this is insane. In Iran, we have the opposite. And Iran, at the moment, there is an incredible moment of hope that I had not felt as of 48 hours ago. 48 hours ago, I was doing my numbers and it wasn't looking good. I was up to somewhere between 65, 70% things are going to get really bad in Iran. I shouldn't say in Iran, but for Iran, because of our government decisions. Right now, we're seeing something very different. There was this escalation of rhetoric, threats across the board, clear divisions within the administration, but nobody willing to back down. And then suddenly, they do what they so grudgingly said they might do, but maybe not, and wouldn't take it seriously anyway. They went in and negotiated. Now again, is that going to be the last we hear of the negotiations? Hard to tell. Right now, it was an optimistic start. Only because they didn't go in saying these are the preconditions, which everybody knew was the message to say these are not serious negotiations. We're negotiating here only because we want to be able to say when we impose extra harsh sanctions, or God forbid when we use a military strike, or say yes to Israel, you can use a military strike, that we tried diplomacy. This was real negotiations on both sides. And it leaves open the possibility that I think gives us something to work for. And that is a nuclear weapons-free zone across the Middle East that would require all countries to open up everything in their country to the international nuke inspection agencies, the IAEA. Because there is a dangerous, provocative nuclear arsenal in the Middle East, which is creating a nuclear arms race across the Middle East, and that is held by Israel. It's the only nuclear power in the Middle East. Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. According to the US National Intelligence estimate, it doesn't even have a nuclear weapons program that's viable. But Israel does. It has between 200 and 400 high-density nuclear bombs in its Dimona plant. And the US agrees that it won't acknowledge that. But every country in the region and every person in the region knows it's there, and it's a big chunk of what's fueling a nuclear arms race. We need a nuclear weapons-free zone. And the irony here, and this is where we come back to international law in the US, and I'm going to end with this part. Because I think on the question of nuclear weapons, we have a chance. We have a chance to have some victories here for a policy going our way, not only a campaign that looked like it might go our way. And that is because the United States is already on record supporting a nuclear weapons-free zone across the Middle East. In fact, it's on record supporting something broader, a weapons of mass destruction-free zone across the Middle East. And how do I know that? It's because it's the language of Article 14 of UN Resolution 687, which was the resolution that ended the war, the ceasefire resolution that ended the US war in Iraq in 1991. And Article 14 says that all of this pressure on Iraq should be part of the goal of achieving a zone in the Middle East free of all weapons of mass destruction, period, full stop. No exception for Israel, no exception for Iran, no exceptions. That's what we need, is international law that applies to everybody. Not a law of empire that says, international law is for the rest of you. For us, there is the law of empire. That's our job. That's the job of lawyers. That's the job of activists. We got a lot of work to do. Thank you.